Hi, I'm Maureen. I was the only one without a gift at Christmas dinner. My son made sure of that. He gave to everyone else, even the neighbors. But when I sat there, empty-handed, something cracked. What hurt wasn't just the forgotten gift. It was the years I'd already given, quietly, without asking for thanks. They thought I'd just smile through it. They didn't know I owned the house they were celebrating in, or that I had a $4 million secret waiting in my purse. Why would a mother need to remind her child that she exists? The lights on their front porch blinked red and white, just like they did every Christmas since Ethan married Jody. I stood at the bottom step, my arms straining under the weight of gift bags. None for me. I adjusted my coat, trying to still the sting in my chest before ringing the bell. Jody opened the door, her smile as quick as it was thin. "Oh, Maureen, you're early." I glanced at my watch. It was 6 on the dot. Traffic was light. She stepped aside, not offering to take a single bag. The house smelled like spiced cider and expensive candles. I heard voices down the hall, laughter, clinking glasses. I took a slow breath and followed the sound. In the living room, Ethan stood beside the towering Christmas tree, wrapped in gold and crimson. His arm around Jody's waist, he looked like a man in command. Laughing, toasting, not even noticing me at first. I slipped in, placing my bags neatly near the couch. Soon, the gift exchange began. They all gathered near the tree, warm drinks in hand. One by one, names were called. Monogrammed robes, digital photo frames, leather wallets with initials. I waited. Then the pile dwindled. No one said my name. Silence hovered until Jody chuckled awkwardly. "Oops, did we miss one?" Ethan gave a casual shrug. "We'll find it later." I smiled, like I hadn't just been erased in front of 10 people. My fingers curled into my sleeve. I'd wrapped gifts for all of them. Thoughtful, quiet little things. I sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, the tree blinking beside me like nothing had happened. After the exchange, I followed Jody into the kitchen. "Where should I put my bag?" I asked. She barely looked up. "Oh, right. The guest room's the nursery now. Just put your stuff by the couch. It's really comfy." The couch. Again. The same couch I bought them after their wedding. I stood in the center of the living room, with my overnight bag hanging like a stone from my hand, watching Jody bustle past. My knees ached, not just from age, but from the memory of scraping them on the hardwood floor years ago, painting that nursery back when Ethan's room had been the same 4 walls. Dinner was loud, stories, inside jokes, clinking forks, but not for me. I spooned sweet potatoes onto my plate, chewing quietly, nodding when spoken to, but mostly watching. They talked about childhood Christmases. Ethan described a snowball fight that never happened, one I would have remembered. I opened my mouth to say so, but Jody leaned in, changing the subject to their ski trip last month. No one noticed. Ethan never once met my eye. I forced a smile and focused on the gravy boat, letting the noise blur into a hum. It was like watching a party through a soundproof window. Festive, but unreachable. After dessert, I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, then returned to the couch. I didn't bother unfolding the blanket they'd left. Instead, I lay down stiff, my bag tucked beside me like a reminder. Above me, the ceiling fan spun slowly, the soft whir humming like a lullaby, meant for someone else. Fred used to say, "One day they'll understand. Just give them time." Fred's been gone 9 years. They understand just fine. They've just chosen to forget. I stared at the ceiling. The couch's springs poked into my hip. From the hallway, I heard them laugh at a TV show I couldn't see. They were warm, fed, together. I rolled onto my side and reached for my purse. My fingers found the cold keychain, steel and smooth, with my name engraved in tiny serif letters. A name no one said tonight, but one they're going to remember. They forgot my name tonight, but tomorrow, I'll remind them who I am. I sat at the long dining table, sandwiched between a decorative plant and the kitchen entrance. My plate was full, but my appetite wasn't. Jody clinked her glass with a fork, rising gracefully, eyes sweeping the room like she was hosting a charity gala. "We just want to thank Ethan," she said, "for putting all of this together. Every detail, from the decor to the catering, was him. I'm just the lucky wife who gets to watch him shine." Everyone clapped. I lifted my glass slightly, trying to speak. "Actually," but my words were swallowed by laughter. Jody leaned in and kissed Ethan's cheek. "You're incredible," she whispered loud enough for us all to hear. No one looked at me. I set my glass down, untouched. After a few awkward moments, I stood to place my casserole on the buffet. It was Fred's favorite, sweet potato with the marshmallows just browned on top. A recipe older than our marriage. I'd made it every year since Ethan was born. Jody rushed over. "Oh, Maureen, let's keep the aesthetic clean, yeah? This smells strong." She slid the dish aside and replaced it with a rosemary-crusted something from a white ceramic platter. A guest I didn't recognize chuckled quietly behind me. "Maybe old school isn't in anymore." I smiled tight. No sense defending a recipe against a rebrand. The patio door beckoned. I slipped outside with a glass of wine and let the cool air bite through my sleeves. Through the window, I watched them. Warm lights, big gestures, stories flowing like wine. The rhythm of their world didn't need me anymore. Years ago, at Ethan's middle school play, he had gripped my arm backstage. "Don't leave after, okay?" His voice had trembled. He'd needed me then. I took a sip. Now I was an afterthought in a room I used to run. Back inside, dessert had started. Laughter floated like balloons, too light to reach me. I took my seat as they went around the table, sharing memories of the hardest year we made it through. When it came to me, silence. Then Jody chimed in with a story from her PR firm. A client disaster turned triumph. Everyone leaned in. She spoke with polish, confidence. She was the new matriarch, crowned not by blood, but by volume. I sat straighter, but no one noticed. The invisible backbone didn't make for good conversation. No one thanked the woman who covered tuition by taking a second job cleaning offices at night. Or the one who never missed a single parent-teacher conference, even when her eyes stung from lack of sleep. They didn't know that the dress Jody wore tonight, the elegant cream one, came from a boutique I helped Ethan afford when he proposed. No one mentions the scaffolding when admiring a cathedral. I smiled, the kind that strains your teeth, and ate a slice of pie I hadn't served. As the evening wound down, I found myself staring at the string lights wrapped around the staircase banister. Fred had done that every year. The first time after he passed, I'd done it myself with shaking hands and wet cheeks. That Christmas, Ethan hadn't even noticed. After everyone had cleared their plates, I helped gather cups, unasked, and rinsed them at the sink. Jody walked by and said, "Thanks, Maureen. You always keep things tidy." I nodded, drying my hands with a cloth that still smelled faintly of bleach. Back on the couch, the one I'd slept on hours earlier, I stared at the same ceiling fan. The blades hadn't changed speed, but I had. They didn't make room for me at their table. So I started building my own. Quietly, deliberately, one thought at a time. They edited me out of their past. I was starting to rewrite my future. After dessert, the living room dimmed. Jody stood up, her voice bright, hands clapping twice. "All right, everyone. Time for a little trip down memory lane." She gestured to the screen, now glowing across the far wall. The guests chuckled, shuffling into place on couches and armchairs, wine in hand. I stayed in the same spot I'd occupied all evening, corner of the couch, behind a tray of leftover pie. The slideshow began with baby Ethan in a hospital blanket, Fred beaming beside him, but I wasn't in the frame. I leaned in slightly. Maybe the next one. But then came Ethan's third birthday, Fred holding him up to blow out candles. Me? Still missing. I didn't speak, just watched, breath measured. There was Christmas morning in '93, Ethan tearing into wrapping paper. No sign of my hands holding the camera or the sweater I knitted him by hand. Then prom night, graduation, vacations, all curated carefully, deliberately. Fred, friends, Jody, but not one photo of me. The more they clapped, the quieter I felt. I'd mailed Ethan 4 boxes of photo albums last summer, scanned them all myself, labeled by year, by event. Just in case you ever want to use them, I'd said over the phone. Apparently, he didn't. When the last slide faded, Jody stood again. "We're so lucky to have such rich memories, right?" She laughed, and people clapped again. She moved around the room, introducing people. "This is Aunt Karen, our godmother. That's Uncle Dan from San Antonio. And oh, this is our neighbor, Rachel. She's like family." When her eyes skimmed past me, I waited. Nothing. A woman beside me, someone I hadn't met before, leaned in with a polite smile. "You're Ethan's mother, right?" I nodded once. "Yes." She blinked. "Oh, I didn't realize. They didn't say." "Exactly." I stood and walked toward the hallway slowly, careful not to disturb the group's mood. Inside the guest bathroom, I turned the light on and stared into the mirror. The silence of the small room wrapped around me like a blanket that didn't warm. I wasn't angry for being forgotten. I was angry for being erased. There's a difference. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This was intention. And it wasn't new. It had been growing quietly for years. The slow shift from, "My mom helped me with that," to, "We figured it out ourselves," from gratitude to avoidance, from history to revision. I leaned forward, palms pressed to the counter, and closed my eyes. I saw myself at Kinko's, scanning every photo one by one. I saw the Sharpie-labeled folders. The phone call confirming he got the package. He knew I'd offered our family's memory, and he chose not to include me in it. When I re-entered the living room, the lights had returned to full brightness. Someone had changed the playlist. A few people danced in socks on the rug. Jody caught my eye. "What did you think?" she asked, smile wide and glinting. I tilted my head and gave a soft smile back. Very polished, tight edit. Everything looked intentional. Ethan stood by the fireplace, refilling his drink. His jaw stiffened when I walked past. Good. I sat back on the couch, my purse beside me, heavy, not with weight, but clarity. I glanced around the room one more time. They thought their version of the past was strong enough to overwrite mine. Next year, I wouldn't send photos. Next year, I'd write the captions myself. If they could rewrite history, then I could revise my role in their future. The fire crackled low in the corner, and the evening had shifted from performative joy to casual murmurs. Wine glasses were half empty, kids asleep upstairs. A circle of family remained, some leaning back in chairs, others perching on the arms of couches, trading stories. I kept my spot near the edge, quiet, sipping peppermint tea I'd made myself. No one offered. Ethan's voice rose above the conversation, drawing attention with ease. "You know," he began, swirling the last of his whiskey, "growing up with almost nothing really shaped me. It taught me how to fight for what I wanted." I blinked. "Nothing?" Jody chimed in, practically glowing. "Exactly. I always say Ethan made himself from scratch. No handouts, just grit." I stared into my cup, the steam blurring my vision more than the heat. Was this a show for the guests, or something they believed? "Remember our coldest winter," Ethan continued. "We had to choose between heat and food. It was rough, but I think that's where I learned discipline." I felt my jaw tighten. That winter, I worked 2 jobs, cleaned offices by night, stocked shelves at dawn. The only reason we had heat was because I skipped meals. That wasn't a lesson in discipline, it was survival, and not his. Someone asked, "How'd you manage to come out so strong from that?" Ethan smiled. "Honestly, it was like raising myself." Laughter. My grip on the armrest stiffened. Not pain, not sadness, just a quiet disbelief. I didn't recognize the man speaking. He'd taken our life and repackaged it as a myth, one where I was either dead or negligent. This was betrayal with Polish, lies in evening wear. I swallowed hard, clearing my throat just enough to be heard. It's interesting hearing your version. All eyes turned. Ethan offered a tight smile. You did your best, Mom. Did I? Jody leaned in, her tone sugary. And look at us now. We turned out okay, didn't we? I nodded slowly, holding her gaze. I see that now, loud and clear. There was a flicker in her eyes, like she caught something but couldn't name it. The room shifted back to other conversations, but I stayed still, my hands resting calmly on my lap. I remembered something Fred said, years ago, when Ethan had twisted the facts at a family gathering. I'd laughed it off, but Fred didn't. Later, over dishes, he'd said, "People who rewrite the past do it because they're scared of who holds the truth." I hadn't thought much of it then. Tonight, those words hit like a final puzzle piece sliding into place. They weren't just forgetting me, they were rewriting me, cropping me out not because I didn't matter, but because I was inconvenient to their version of success. And I'd let them. For too long, I mistook love for silence. I thought biting my tongue was a virtue, but it had only taught them how to cut me out without resistance. I looked around the room, the people I'd fed, protected, prayed for. Some weren't even blood, but I'd made room in my heart for them anyway. Now they sat in a home I once helped pay for, listening to stories built on my absence. That was the moment something shifted. Not rage, not vengeance, clarity. I wouldn't scream, wouldn't beg, but I'd be silent no longer. I had been quiet out of love, but they were about to learn what silence looks like with power. By the time most of the guests had left, the house had settled into that half-hush state, music still playing softly, plates stacked in the sink, wine glasses half drunk and forgotten. I stood near the kitchen island, swirling the last of my tea, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Maureen," a voice said gently. I turned. It was Richard, one of Fred's old friends. We hadn't spoken more than a handful of words all night. "I've been meaning to say, this whole thing," he gestured around. "It's beautiful. I heard you covered most of the costs. Ethan didn't mention it." I gave him a tight smile. "He didn't have to. I didn't do it for applause." Richard nodded, but his eyes lingered. He knew, and worse, I knew. For all my effort, all my quiet giving, I'd bought a seat at a table where no one even noticed I was sitting. Back in the living room, Jody stood once again, her glass raised high. "To Ethan," she said, "the man behind tonight's magic. Every single detail. He thought of it all." The applause swelled. I stayed in my chair. I didn't stand. Didn't raise my glass. Just watched. Not in anger. Not anymore. What I felt was colder than that. It was clarity. The kind that comes when denial finally lets go. Ethan approached a few minutes later with a dessert plate in hand. "I know it's not like your pecan pie," he said, setting it in front of me, "but it's not terrible." I looked down at the overly sweet slice, untouched. "Do you remember who paid the caterer?" He blinked. "Jody handled it." "With whose card?" I asked, my voice even. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound followed. I stood, walked past him without waiting for a reply. Jody watched me from across the room. Her eyes narrowed, not in confusion, but calculation. She was good at reading shifts. She saw it, the change. A few heads turned as I passed, sensing something under the surface, a tension no one could name, but everyone felt. I didn't offer an explanation, didn't give them the satisfaction, not this time. In the guest bathroom, I leaned against the sink and pulled my phone from my purse. Opened the real estate app, bookmarked at the top. The listing was still there, my condo in Florida. Light-drenched living room, 2 balconies, paid off in full. My thumb hovered over the Manage Ownership tab. Not yet, but soon. They'd spent the night erasing me, one story at a time, one omission here, a false toast there. But I'd written checks, paid invoices, picked floral arrangements. Because I loved them, yes. but also because I wanted to believe giving meant belonging. It didn't. That night, I stared into the guest mirror and whispered aloud, "I've allowed enough." I didn't whisper out of fear. It was strategy. When I returned to the hallway, I passed Jody speaking to a cousin. Her smile was tight, her hand clutching her wineglass like a lifeline. She caught my eye. I smiled back, calm, controlled. Let her wonder what I'd do next. Because the truth is, I wasn't planning to scream, threaten, or demand. I'd simply stop disappearing. They thought I had nothing left to give. They didn't know I'd been saving the best for last. The morning after Christmas never feels like a celebration. It's all the aftermath. The crumbs, the empty wine bottles, the lipstick-smudged napkins. But in that house, it was more than just cleanup. It was avoidance wrapped in politeness. I came downstairs early. The kitchen was too quiet. No clatter of pans, no music humming in the background. Ethan stood at the counter, stirring sugar into my tea, like he used to do when he was 10 and wanted something. He smiled, cautious, thin. "Morning, Mom," he said. "You sleep okay?" "Fine," I answered. The chair at the dining table creaked as I sat. Jody was already there, scrolling her phone, smiling like nothing had been said the night before. I noticed the same look in both their eyes. Performance psych. "I was going to head out soon," I said, "but I didn't want to leave without giving you something." I reached into my purse and placed the manila envelope in the center of the table. Ethan eyed it. Jody paused mid-scroll. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside was a certified copy of the house deed. I let him read the part with my name in bold. "You wanted the house," I said, calm as still water. "And in a way, you already have it. All your memories are rooted here." His eyes flicked toward Jody, who sat motionless. "But the title? That stays with me." Silence pressed down on the room like humidity. "And for the record," I added, "I'm not investing in your startup." Ethan opened his mouth, but I lifted a hand. "I'm not asking, I'm stating." He looked at me like I was someone else entirely. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point fingers. I listed facts. "You were in college because of me. This kitchen got remodeled on my dime. When Fred passed, I kept this family upright. I didn't ask to be thanked. I asked not to be forgotten." Jody shifted uncomfortably. "We never meant to erase you." "But you did," I said, repeatedly, efficiently. I pushed back from the table. The chair didn't squeak this time. "I don't need recognition, but I will not be made invisible." Jody stood quickly. "You always come here on holidays." "Not anymore," I replied. "This house isn't where I live, and it's not where I'm welcome." I picked up my coat and walked toward the door where my suitcase waited. Ethan trailed after me. "Mom, wait!" I turned to face him. "You're not a boy anymore, Ethan. I stopped raising you years ago, but I'm done financing the myth that you did it all alone." He stepped back like my words had weight. Jody crossed her arms. "So what now? You walk away and pretend we never mattered?" "No," I said. "I walk away because I finally matter. To myself." Outside, the air was crisp. I loaded my bag into the trunk and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake, backed out slowly, didn't look in the rear view, because what was behind me had already made its choice. They stole my name to build their story. I'm taking it back. In ink, in deed, in legacy. The sun was sharp through the windshield as I pulled onto the main road. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just drove. A quiet kind of storm brewed inside me, the kind that didn't need thunder to be dangerous. The first message came before I'd even hit the freeway. "Why are you abandoning your son?" It was from a cousin I hadn't heard from in 3 years. Then another. "Family means forgiveness. You should know that at your age." I pulled into a parking lot outside a CVS and sat in the car. Stared straight ahead. They were already painting their version, passing around their brush, leaving my name off the canvas. Again. When I arrived at Anita's, she was already at the door. She didn't speak, just hugged me and took my coat. Inside, the kettle whistled. A tray with lemon tea waited next to a folder thick with documents. Anita tapped the folder. "You need to see this." She flipped open her laptop and pulled up an email chain. A paralegal friend from Jody's old firm had flagged something. "She tried to access your financials through your old laptop." My breath caught. "They were setting up a transfer," she said. "Had she succeeded, the Florida condo would have been jointly invested property." I sat down slowly. So the warmth, the sudden kindness, it wasn't guilt, it was planning. Anita slid a pen across the table. "We can move forward today if you're ready." I nodded. "Do it." She handed me a document to sign. Trust restructuring, full ownership protection, revocation of Ethan's emergency access. I didn't hesitate. Before Anita could say more, my phone buzzed again. A notification from Facebook. Ethan's profile. "I grew up with nothing," the post began. "Food stamps taught me humility. My journey was never easy, but I never let money define me." Below were hundreds of likes, hearts, comments praising his grit, his story. One line stopped me cold. "My mother always said she couldn't help, so I learned to stand on my own." I didn't comment. I didn't text. But something settled in my spine. "If they want an audience," I said to Anita, "they'll get one, but on my terms." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at her kitchen table, under warm yellow light, and began writing. Not a social media post, not a rebuttal, a letter. To Madison. "Sweetheart," I wrote, "you won't remember me as more than a voice or a smell for a long time, but one day, someone might tell you a version of me that doesn't feel quite right." I told her about her father as a boy, his soft curls, his drawings taped to the fridge, the way he once cried because he thought Santa forgot me. "I never stopped loving your father, but I stopped letting him love me wrong." The words came easily, not bitter, just clear. "When you grow up and hear I was selfish, read this again. No, I didn't disappear. I just stopped performing." I folded the letter, slid it into a cream envelope, and wrote her name in the corner. Not to my granddaughter. Just Madison. My name may have been erased from Ethan's stories, but I was writing my own now, and I intended to be the narrator, not the footnote. They wanted my story silent. I gave it a voice, and made sure it would outlive them. Ethan's message came mid-morning. "Let's talk. Just us. One coffee." I didn't reply right away. I let the morning pass. Let the silence settle in. Then, I picked a cafe downtown, one with big windows and clean sightlines. I arrived first and took a table near the back. Anita followed 5 minutes later and sat at a table behind me, phone in hand, reading nothing. Ethan walked in at 12:15, glancing around nervously before spotting me. I waved and he approached, hesitating before sitting. "Thanks for coming, Mom." I nodded once. He ordered black coffee, no cream, no sugar. Then he looked at me with that familiar tight smile, the one he wore when he thought charm might outpace consequence. "I've been thinking about how everything unfolded," he started, "and I know things got heated." I said nothing. "I overreacted," he continued. "We both did. But we're family, and families fight, right?" He paused, waiting for me to fill the silence. I didn't. His tone shifted, warmer, rehearsed. "I've got something in the works, something big, a startup. It's early stage, but promising. Scalable. Clean energy, very now. We just need a bit of capital to really take off." I raised an eyebrow. "I figured, you've done so well. And wouldn't it be nice to build something together, finally? Put the past behind us and move forward?" There it was, the pitch dressed up in forgiveness. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, swiped once, then slid it across the table. He stared at the screen. It was an internal email from Anita's firm. Documentation of Jody's failed attempt to access my property records. Date, time, IP address. It wasn't a maybe. It was a receipt. You were building something all right, I said. A trap. He recoiled. Mom, no, that wasn't. Jody just. Don't insult me further, I said. You used my name to make yourselves look like survivors. You used my struggle to win sympathy, then tried to take what I earned. I pulled out the second envelope, a notarized asset restructure. You're not part of my estate anymore. This has already been filed. His face dropped, but he said nothing. I stood, reached into my coat, and pulled out one last envelope. For Madison, I said, for when she's old enough, so she knows who I was before your version edits me out of her life, too. He didn't reach for it. I laid it on the table, neatly, deliberately. You told the world I was cold, but I was the one holding the roof over your head. You told them I disappeared, but I was the one you never looked for. Behind me, Anita stood. I didn't look back, just walked out, coat swinging behind me like punctuation. Outside, the air was brisk, honest. I felt no weight in my hands, no ache in my spine. Just air, just steps, just forward. I forgave them the moment I stopped needing them to admit what they did. That was my freedom. The ocean sounded different here, gentler. The waves didn't crash the way they did in California. They whispered, back and forth, as if the sea itself was tired of shouting. I walked along the sand, barefoot, the breeze wrapping around my ankles like silk. It was early January, and still warm enough to leave the windows cracked at night. I passed a group of retirees in sun hats doing yoga near the pier. One of them waved. I smiled back. No one here knew what I had walked away from, and no one asked. That anonymity felt like peace. For the first time in decades, I wasn't expected to show up for anyone. No casseroles to prepare, no holidays to organize, no phone calls to chase. I simply was. Back at the condo, I checked my phone. Missed calls. 17 of them. Cousins, in-laws, even Ethan. A voicemail from him waited. I played it once. I just wish you didn't make everything public, he said. It could have stayed between us. I deleted it without a second thought. Anita called that afternoon. The community's heard, she said. Some are proud, some are pretending they don't know. She hesitated. Ethan and Jody lost their lead investor. Apparently, word got around about the attempted asset transfer. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. All I said was, actions have echoes. Brunches resumed, but I no longer attended. Let them sit in the silence I used to occupy. A week later, I received a letter. Handwritten. Neat cursive I recognized from old Christmas tags. Dear Aunt Maureen, I never knew you were the one who paid for Ethan's school. You were never mentioned. I only found out after everything. I'm sorry. I wish I had known sooner. I folded the letter, read it again, then replied. I didn't write to shame her. I wrote to tell the truth. Yes, I helped. No, I wasn't perfect. But I showed up, quietly, consistently. That's what love used to look like in this family. I hope someday it does again. A few days later, I hosted a dinner. Not a big affair, just Anita, John, and 2 neighbors from down the hall. We sat on the balcony, plates of grilled salmon, lemony arugula, wine chilled just enough. We laughed, talked about books and movies, and whether poinsettias should still be allowed on the table after New Year's. No one mentioned the word legacy. No one needed to. I raised my glass. To names that stay, I said, and love that doesn't ask for repayment. They clinked their glasses to mine. No one interrupted me. After dinner, I walked down to the mailbox. A breeze moved through the palms as I opened the lid. Inside was a catalog, a flyer, and a small envelope addressed in a child's handwriting. Madison. I held it close. Not everything I'd planted would bloom right away, but it would bloom. Sometimes letting go isn't weakness. It's wisdom earned through scars. I spent years believing love meant silence, that if I just gave enough, forgave enough, I'd eventually be seen. But being erased quietly hurts just as deeply as being yelled at. If my story reminds you of a moment you let yourself shrink to keep peace, then maybe now is your time to take up space again. Have you ever been written out of your own family's story? Or maybe you've watched someone you love get diminished by the ones they gave everything to? I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. What resonated with you most? If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't connect, I still want to know. What didn't work, and what do you want to see more of? And of course, if you found meaning here, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss the next story. There's always more to tell and more to heal.